I'm gonna keep it brief. I planned on writing a whole speech and all that, but I didn't want to. I thought I was gonna get nervous and mess around and start crying and stuff up here, so I ain't going. But March 4th, if for anybody who doesn't know, was a day that changed my life, forever. I went in normal practice, trying to have fun out there with the sport I love, and I went in to make a tackle that turned out to be a freak accident. None of the trainers had ever heard of it. I'd never heard of it. I went in to tackle him, and my whole body just went stiff. And then next thing I know, I can feel everything coming back, and except for my right arm just hangs. And I can remember them telling me to go sit down, wait for the end of practice to be over, and I just started bawling and crying because all I have in my head is that image of me when I was just stuffed, just stiff. And I remember coming back a couple hours later to the training room and, them not knowing what was going on and going to the doctors, and I ended up having to go to Stanford to, see a specialist up there. And he ends up telling me that, you're not going to be able to play this season. And so right then and there, I lost it. I go from having conversations with Duran, thinking about having the opportunity, playing the next level and stuff like that, and then to have something like that happen to me and be told that I'm going to be done playing football was the hardest thing I've ever dealt with in my life to this day. And I tried to be strong, and I remember crying to my roommates and crying to teammates and stuff like that, and just not knowing where I was going to go. And, my own teammates, friends and family had more faith in me than I had faith in myself. And still to this day, I'm left with my arm just hanging around. So when people say, "What's up? How's your arm?" I just say, "Just hanging around," like a joke. But like I said, you go from playing the sport that you love the whole time to just being taken away from you was, in the blink of an eye, was just outrageous to me. I could have went home. Coaches were telling me you can go home because you had a traumatic injury and stuff like that. But there was nothing back home for me to go to. You know what I mean? Wanted to finish, graduate, and still be around my teammates and stuff like that, because they were the ones who kept me, kept me humble, kept me strong, kept me, around and stuff like that. And, just want everybody to know, embrace it, embrace the game you play, embrace everything you do, because in the blink of an eye, you never know when it's going to be over. Friends and your parents always tell you, your stuff's going to come to an end. Your sport's going to come to an end. Nobody's going to, play baseball forever, run track forever, basketball, any sport. You're not going to do it forever. And so, just when that time does come, just make sure you went out with a bang when you didn't do it. And that's why I'm glad I still have my days, of course, when I'm down and stuff like that. But I can say that I had one whole season of college and I enjoyed myself. And even then, the next year, I had a different role on my team and all that stuff. So, you just make sure you go out with a bang. And, I love everybody out here who supported me and who kept me strong and had me, just being there for me. Shout out to Roomies, Greg, Duran, Ant being here. Shout out to my team, DBs, everybody who's been there for me and supporting me. And love you guys, and I'll see you guys around.